Shane.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's really great to have you here. So, I am going to start with something before we get into who you are and where you're from.
Right.
Just going to start with something which is one of these like mind cards. It's just a little icebreaker. So just a little, what 3 words would your friends use to describe you?
My God, right. What 3 words? I guess it depends whether the things I'd like to think they describe me as or actually would describe me as. They would say I hope they'd say I'm fun-loving. I hope they'd say, and they would say I'm hardworking. And then I think they'd say I'm honest.
Love that. Love that. Well, to be honest, from the few minutes conversation that we've had to prepare for this chat today, Shane, I can say that I probably can see that those qualities there, you speak very passionately and amazingly about this really exciting tech startup that you are leading, Vitrue Health. So really excited to hear a little bit more about it today, in particular because I, as a yoga teacher, am a die-hard fan of anything related to the body and the way that we move and the way that we look after our bodies. So can you tell me, just to begin with, a bit about what the mission is, what it is that you're doing?
Sure, yeah. So the mission of the company is to reduce musculoskeletal pain for millions of people. And it's basically that simple. It started that simple. We didn't, when we started, necessarily know how we were going to do that or where we were going to do that. But the idea was musculoskeletal pain is too high. It's almost the definition of a preventable problem considering how many people have it. And there are areas of the world where, not that it's been solved, but that we've gotten more sophisticated in solving it. Things like professional sport being the one that I would talk most about. So I guess the origin of the company is I started my career in academia. And the idea was, in my PhD, was can we do anything, measure anything about particularly older adults to predict if they're going to have musculoskeletal problems, knee and hip operations being the big most common ones. And we can talk about it in more detail, but basically, if you strap enough sensors to a person and take enough data, can you say in 12 months' time this person's likely to need X, Y, Z? And in truth, you can. So in academic circles, you can. There's a whole lot more depth to it. But basically, the way you do it in academia isn't necessarily practical in the real world. At the scale that we want to get to for millions of people, it doesn't necessarily transfer. So I've spent the last 13 years since leaving academia trying to figure out how do you take what we can do in academia but apply it to the rest of us, and that's Vitrue Health.
Amazing. So what are we actually talking about? We're talking about yoga classes and sending physios into workplaces?
Yeah, fair. So, and kind of both of those come under the umbrella, but you introduced us as a tech startup, which is very relevant. So we create a platform, an online platform, which is, I guess, a website where a person logs in. We sell it to companies as either an employee benefit or something to help them meet employer regulations, things like DSE regulations for desk workers, or both in reality. And basically, a colleague will log into this platform. The very first thing it'll do, let's say I'm working behind a desk, I'm a software developer. It will turn on the camera. It will look at how you hold yourself, like what your head position is, what your shoulder positions is, where the position of your screen is relative to your head. It'll look at basically how you sit yourself all day. And then it'll dive into about 300 different little things about you. So it could be your hobbies. It could be if you've got a newborn baby at home. It could be how you commute to work. It could be everything about your life, basically. We take that data, we put it into an algorithm, which is the same thing we do in academia, same thing we do in elite sport, which processes all that data and figures out, Alethea, you're more inclined to develop lower back pain because of these 16 things, 5 of which are in your control. Here's what you need to do to reduce that risk. Or if you already have that back pain, reduce these factors that are impacting that pain. So it's basically an online platform that acts as we stay very far away from saying anything like digital physiotherapy. It's not replacing clinicians. It's not going to replace healthcare pathways. It's a digital platform that sits before a person gets to the point where they need to enter a kind of traditional healthcare pathway.
Amazing. So we're talking a tech tool, kind of AI type thing that looks at a person, looks at an employee, profiles them based on not just physical stuff, but the things that they do with their body and what they need to do with their body, and makes a kind of an assessment, so a fit assessment based on that, and then therefore some recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we always say the better the assessment, the better the outcome. So everybody's musculoskeletal health and musculoskeletal pain is wildly different depending on all the different things that make you you. So trying to treat a person or not treat, I want to stay away from that word, but trying to help empower the person to fix their own issues and lower their own risk without knowing what makes them doesn't work. It's too generic. And that's why I mentioned sports earlier on. If you have 11 football players who are paid an ungodly amount of money to play football, you can put the time and effort and money into understanding exactly why this player is going to get injured versus this player is going to get injured. You would never just go at both with the exact same program. You have a very specific program for each. They have that luxury because they get paid so much money that the unit economics make sense for it. In the last several years, technology's gotten to the point where we can bring that to the rest of us. We don't all need to put up with generic systems either. And if you talk to, there's so many great occupational health providers here and so many great clinicians here. If you talk to any of them, none of them are taking a generic approach. Like, they're all putting the effort in to take a personalized approach. Our kind of goal is using technology at scale. Can you do that?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's really quite interesting. It could really change the way that people accept this truth or this information, because I think we're used to saying, oh, well, that sitting down for 8 hours isn't good for you, or we're used to saying, oh, well, the job that you're doing lifting is causing you back pain. Those things are talked about and have been for a long time. Yeah. For some reason we don't believe it. So is this the kind of piece of evidence that employees, individuals and employers will need to actually make change with regards to how we work and our behaviours, but also then how we treat and remedy or prevent?
Yeah. I love that aspect of the conversation, because there's also a culture aspect to it. So yeah. I turned 38 recently, and when you turn 38, you expect, okay, I'm going to get back pain now because I'm supposed to, and that's what happens. And that's just not true.
Wait till you're 40.
and that's kind of like, we can joke about it, but that is the belief that most people have of, you reach a certain age, and yeah, you should lift with your knees, and yeah, you should sit with good posture and break your sedentary periods, but you're going to get pain because you're in your 40s now. And that's not true. Like, there's no reason for us to just accept that's the case. And for as long as employees and colleagues believe that, they're less inclined to do the things that they're supposed to, because they think, yeah, I've got back pain, I'm supposed to. And that's a big part of what we have to change for any of this to work, because it doesn't matter how sophisticated your algorithm is or how much effort you put into a preventative program. If the person's sitting there thinking, yeah, of course I've got pain, I'm supposed to, they won't do the things you need them to do to get rid of the pain. And it is in their hands. No matter how good of an employer you are, no matter how good your well-being programs are, if the employee or the colleague doesn't engage, it's all useless. So that has to come as part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that is always a really interesting part of the conversations that we have, which is the employer and the employee working together. Presumably, you're an excellent resource for employers in terms of giving them real true insights as to the impact of the behaviour and the ways their workforces are working, whether it's, healthcare professionals who are spending too much time on their feet and bending over and lifting versus the desk-based professionals who are sitting and, not moving. There's that insight, isn't there? The evidencing and the kind of helping to change how people work. Plus, then that also supporting their budget decisions around how they then support their workforce. But then there's the evidence to the individuals themselves. I remember I've done a tiny bit of work with yoga in professional sport, and this realization I had, which was, okay, these people, they do this thing for a living. They kick this football around and get paid all of that money, and they respect what they do, their body and the movements. And so that's why they're listening to me about how this yoga can help. Yeah. And then I'm in front of a room full of people at work, and when I say, well, you're sitting down all day, so therefore you should potentially look after your lower back a bit more doing X, Y, and Z, they don't believe me. They're not getting paid enough. If they were being incentivized more to sit down, then they would believe me. So yeah, it's an interesting transition, isn't it? That application of this thinking in the sports world into just the lives of the rest of us.
Yes.
So what have you got any case studies or examples you can talk to me about from the sports world? I mean, yes, we see it, we see that, our football players are, not having injuries or having injuries, and it's a big crisis and it shouldn't have happened. What does it look like in practice in sport?
Sure. So in sport, we like to break it down to 3 kind of steps. So the first step before someone gets injured is you want to test them to predict an injury before it happens. Because if you have that knowledge, there's something you can do about it. So What can we do to measure about the person, let's say on a Monday morning, to understand is his or her injury risk higher for Saturday or not? So that's predicting. Once you have that prediction, then we can do something about it. We can intervene to prevent it. So predict, then prevent. And then if that fails, and sometimes it fails, and that's okay, then you move on to helping the person recover. So in our world, we tend to think of, you turn your ankle, you go to the physio, whether it's NHS or through work, whatever it might be, and then you probably will get excellent care. Like we have a lot of good things in place for that. But in sports, we'd all consider that a failure. We failed step 1 and 2. We got to number 3, and it's important that's there as a safety net. But what happened in number 1 and 2? For the rest of us, there are things like health and safety regulations which are in place to try and help us predict, and there'll be health screening programs, which I actually heard some good talks on today to try and predict these things. Technology-wise, and me coming from a tech startup, I think it's failed a little bit on that for probably too long, basically. We've had technology to help you meet the regulations, and some of it's very good. Some of it tends to be a bit of a race to the bottom for how cheap can we meet the regulation, where we can technically cover our legal liability, but forgetting the original point of the regulation, which is stopping these issues from starting in the first place. So I guess I'm going a long way around here of saying that system in sport of predict, prevent, recover, there's no reason why we shouldn't be applying that to the rest of us, and technology should be helping that. Again, I kind of want to say where that sits in a full pathway. Once someone gets to the stage where they've got like a complex need or severe pain, they're going to go see a healthcare professional. That's right, and we don't want to get rid of that. Like that's absolutely where they should go. There's another group of people who will wait too long to raise their hand. Like this always happens. Someone will have lower back pain. If you ask them what they'll do about it, they'll say nothing. I'll ignore it until it gets so bad that I have to do something about it. Missing the fact that you just made it infinitely more difficult to solve because we let it get that much further on. Back to the sports thing, we just wouldn't let that happen. The other thing that you mentioned there that was really interesting is we run these dinners for customers where we get 10 customers together and we get a different speaker to come and speak. And lately we've been doing a lot with Olympians. So obviously Paris Olympics is a huge success for the UK, and there's a lot of these amazing athletes around the place. So we get them to come, have dinner, and basically talk about their approach to workplace well-being at what's basically the highest level of workplace you can imagine, like where they're looking for hundreds of seconds of improvement. And they talk about this shared responsibility model where obviously they've got these amazing coaches and the coach will tell them exactly what they need to do. But even at their level, nobody's holding their hand. Like if you don't do your rehab, if you don't do your prehab, if you don't do your stretches and exercise and all these different things, nobody's going to come and knock on your door saying, come on, we need to go do it. They'll just say, oh, fine, you don't want to go to the Olympics. That's on you. And I don't want to sound too harsh for colleagues in the corporate world or in the workplace. But if Olympians are doing it that way and nobody's holding their hand, a company can't really hold your hand either.
Yeah.
A lot of what I would say from an employer perspective is the comms. So, for example, I talk about the predicting and preventing. There are regulations in place. Some of them are very good regulations. One of them is DSE regulations, which I won't go into too much depth.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah. But for people who sit behind a desk, that's the government's attempt to say, let's stop this person getting injured. And what we would always say is, if you're sending an email to a colleague saying it's time for you to do your DSE assessment, the only way they can open that is say, you want something from me. Like, there's nothing in this for me. I don't want to be DSE compliant. I just want to go on with my job. Whereas if you send them an email saying, do this so we can help you avoid getting neck and back pain, then it's like, okay, well, this is for me. And nothing's changed there other than how you framed it for me.
So true.
So I think that's again, for sports, I just think there's so many things that overlap between the two.
That has just been a little ding moment for me because I've been working in an NHS organisation, so I've been the receiver of the email, like with the form, and it's made in Word and it's awful, and I have to print it out and write things in and send it to someone. Yeah, it's a reframe. A lot of this is a reframe by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I really think so. And I think we can steal and have no shame about stealing.
Pinch with pride.
The concepts like, what are apps that we were talking beforehand about Duolingo. How good is Duolingo at getting people to come back and do it? And sometimes it's through just annoying you. Sometimes it's through the cute little owl dying or whatever it might be. But like little steely ways to just help you reframe it so that we're not asking you to do 20 minutes of rehab. We're asking you to do 2 minutes of rehab 10 times that day. And just try to put it into something that's a bit gamified or a bit simpler or fits into your life a little bit better. Not moving a million miles away from here's an A4 sheet of exercises, do them or you will slap you on the wrist next time you come over.
Okay, great. So that's interesting. Sorry, so the product also gives you the solution too?
Yeah.
All right.
I should do a better job of selling the product here. So yeah, the concept behind the product is all three. So we want to assess the person so we can figure out what's your risk for developing pain. Once we have that, we can tell you, look, here's things you can do to reduce that risk. If it's appropriate, if the person has something serious, then we escalate. But for the majority of people, give you what to do. And those will be split between, there'll be ergonomic changes. So your screen's at the wrong height or your chair's set up wrong or whatever it might be. There will be behavioral changes. So you are sitting there all day at work and you're not getting up at all. We did this amazing study where we found that there was a higher correlation between reducing pain for people who had a glass of water on their desk than there was for standing desks.
Say it again.
So people who had a glass of water were less likely to have pain than someone who had a standing desk. And the reason for this, and this is all anecdotal now, I can't give you statistical significance papers.
You're an academic, come on.
The reason that the best theory that we had was, well, okay, first off, most people have a standing desk don't use it right. So they'll either not use it enough, or we'll find a lot of people using it too much. They'll stand at a standing desk for 6 hours a day, which is not the right way to do it either. People who have a glass of water on their desk get up to fill it more often, and they use the bathroom more often. And as ridiculous as that sounds, those little micro breaks are better than the $2,000 standing desk that you don't use. So
that's it.
Those are the little behaviours.
Get the glass of water.
Yeah. Like, as silly as that sounds, the data would show it has a bigger impact. And then the last one would be this physiological thing. So can we get you to do quick stretches? And you might be someone who's happy to do 10 minutes in the morning, or it might be we integrate with your Teams app and every hour you get a 15-second stretch to do. And it's just a little reminder to break the concentration. And it's an interesting world when you're talking about anything to do with corporate wellness. We're never saying break your concentration in a way that's going to interrupt your work. But everybody knows taking a break every hour is better for concentration. So if you can fit stuff like this into that, which we know is better for work anyways, then everybody's better in every way.
Amazing. And so what does it look like? Is it an app? Is it, do we, have a platform that pings us and interrupts our emails? Like, what's the interface?
Yeah, great question. That was a simpler answer a couple of years ago. Now it's in a good way, a more complicated answer. We've covered in this conversation that kind of reducing barriers is the most important thing. So getting people to do the things they need to do is the big battle. The less barrier we have to that, the better. So we've ended up now, there's a web app that can go onto your internet, whatever it might be. There's phone apps, there's a Microsoft Teams app, there's a Slack app. You kind of need everything so that whatever way that person works, it can be front and center in their life. Majority of people probably Teams or the website are the main two things people use. But I don't want to phrase it as taking away excuses, but taking away barriers is the better way of saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. And we've called you a tech startup, but you're quite established with a good customer base. And you talked just now, you mentioned about how you work with clients, getting them together. And that, can you tell us a little bit about, some of the success stories and some of the case studies?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first off, we don't really have an industry that we specialize in because back pain's fairly universal, sadly, hopefully not forever. And if we meet our mission, it won't be. But across whether you're in a manufacturing space or a tech space or marketing or consulting or insurance or whatever, this problem exists. So we've ended up with all sorts of clients, like I should rattle them off. I should be able to do this quicker, but we work with Bupa and Eon Next and Hastings Direct and Next 15 and all sorts of different companies, Simply Health. The only kind of common factor across all of them is, and this is becoming more and more common in a really good way, is when the health and safety team and the kind of well-being team, whether that's HR or benefits or whatever, are quite forward thinking and they're looking at their PMI bill and thinking this is going up and it's not going to stop going up. And rather than reducing the coverage of PMI, they're saying, how are we going to get in front of this? That's when they come to us, basically. What's driving your healthcare costs will be some combination of mental health, which obviously really important to do something about, and lots of people are doing stuff about, musculoskeletal health, which is us, and then things like cancer and diabetes, which are obviously crucial, but that bit harder for an employer to get their hands into. In general, from a whether it works perspective in the case studies that you mentioned, which I should definitely say is the first question anyone should ask. It's very easy for me to stand up here and talk about sports and the glamorous stuff of that. If it doesn't work, what's the point? What we would find is for about half of people who have pain, their pain will come down by about 40%. For the other half, we haven't figured out how to get their pain to come down. And I can't stand here and say, roll out with Vitrue Health and all musculoskeletal pain in the company is going to disappear. That's not how it works. Those other 50% will be some combination of people who we didn't convince to engage, which is definitely possible, or the ones who needed to go the full healthcare pathway. And then our job is, how seamless can we make that handover? Like, can we give whatever the escalation pathway is, the occupational health or physiotherapist or whatever, can we give them a head start by saying, here's why Alethea is coming to you, here's what we know about her, here's how long she's had her pain, to set up that pathway for as much success as it can have.
Yeah. I mean, it's still incredible results. So congratulations on that. It sounds really great. You mentioned just now engagement. And back to my yoga frustration. Like that is a really tough thing, isn't it? What do you hear from actual users in terms of the journey of being a user of Vitrue Health? And
Sure. So there's the kind of shallow but important bit of, does it look good and does it feel good, and it doesn't look like a regulatory tool, it looks like something that is for well-being, and that kind of user experience, which I use the word shallow. I don't mean that in a negative way, and it's a huge amount of effort, and I have this amazing design team to get it to that point. That's really important, and
things need to be simple though.
Absolutely, yeah, it needs to be intuitive, and people need to enjoy using it, and like
the Duolingo example.
And we all have phones now. We all have applications that we can point to and say, I like that because it's easy to use, or it's my enjoyable thing. So people aren't easy pleased that way, because rightly so, their expectations are high now. Like, we all have consumer apps that we use, and everything that you use in a professional setting should be as good as a consumer thing. Why wouldn't it be? So that's the first thing for user experience. The second thing is how personalized you can make it. So genuinely, if you and I have the same pathway through one of our products, or any of the products here today, your experience should be totally different to mine. Because if I'm sitting here with chronic lower back pain and you don't have pain yet, but you're at risk, our attitudes and our psychology going into that are going to be totally different. So if it starts talking to me about the risk factors for shoulder pain, but I'm sitting here with lower back pain, I'm shutting down. Like, the chances of me doing what you need me to do are vanishing. So the two things that I think from his experience and the feedback we get is, one, making a consumer grade software, and two, it needs to feel like it's about you. So, and the other thing about that is, when we talk about workplace pain, from a user perspective, they can boil it down to my posture at my desk or whether I'm lifting with proper technique. You do have to remember that everything that happens to you outside of work, you bring to work. So if you have my brother and his wife are about to have a baby in the next couple of weeks, and their next couple of months are going to be at much increased risk of lower back pain, because they're not going to be sleeping, they're going to be bent over a crib, they're going to be holding a baby, praying for it to go to sleep at 4 a.m. Their risk factors have nothing to do with how they hold themselves at their desk, or they do, but they're wildly outweighed by their life. So everyone's experience has to be different, because your life is so different.
Yeah, that's really true, actually. So how does the product work then? In terms of that, because we do have life stages and different things that we're experiencing, having children, having toddlers, looking after an elderly parent, other health conditions that might be changing how you can actually move. You might have a knee problem, but that's actually meaning that you're not doing your normal exercise routine, but then the other issues set in.
Yeah.
How does the product work in that respect? Is it like a routine assessment?
Yeah,
what's the model?
We've basically got, and that's a really good question, we've basically gone all in on this concept of assessments. So you'll do a baseline assessment, which will differ for different people, but we're just trying to cover the fundamentals of like what your job is, what your basic risks are, have you had pain in the past, that kind of stuff. At the end of that, we'll offer you additional assessments, because my clinical team would love to get you to do 4 hours of assessment, but that's not realistic. So we'll get you for 5 minutes, and then we'll offer you, do you want to do one of these other assessments? So what are other assessments? Things like, well, if you're pregnant or something, obviously that's a very specific one. Actually, let's talk about this for a second. I went on quite a big journey over the last year. I'd consider myself quite knowledgeable about musculoskeletal health. When it comes to the difference, the kind of gender pain gap and the risk for men versus women, from a sports perspective, and the biomechanics of women football players get hugely increased rates of ACL tears, for example. I understand that all very well. In the last 2 years, we found data that showed the gender pain gaps, the difference between both the incidence and intensity of pain for men and women is ridiculous. It's 22% higher incidence of pain for women and 11% higher intensity of pain.
Wow.
So then that throws you into, well, what assessments do we need to build to understand that? And then it becomes things like menopause is one that everyone's talking about right now. Menopause, from a hormone perspective, massively changes your risk of developing musculoskeletal pain. There's a whole joint laxity, and there's a whole different reasons. Similarly for menstrual cycles, the number of women that we did these interviews with, and obviously we've got, very proud of this, 50-50 men and women split, which is not always the case for tech startups. But the internal lived experience too, women on let's say the week coming up to their period having lower back pain and just thinking that's inevitable, back to that original point of, it's what happens. So we'll also have little assessments to say, well, do you get back pain during your period, and do you want to do an assessment about that?
Yeah.
For some of them, there'll be really clear actions we can give on the outside. For some of them, it's just an education piece to say, like, here's why that's happening, and here's what you can expect throughout that period and things you can manage the symptoms with
Yeah.
and so on. So yeah, we're kind of gone in all in on different mini assessments.
Love
So
that.
whether it's cycling or period pain, we should have a little assessment to help us learn about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like it's really good. It's obviously good for the individual that's being assessed, but also those insights and that evidence for organisations, for employers to think, well, no, actually, you've got a workforce of 62% female, and X percent of those are of their time in life where they're having menstrual cycles, and actually, can we support them that the week when they're perhaps experiencing some of these very legitimate symptoms, can we expect less from them or allow them to make the reasonable adjustments so that they can manage those symptoms? Because the back pain is real, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Finally, some validation. Likewise, menopause, as you say, it's very topical, very important for us to be acknowledging menopause symptoms and educating in our places, women and men, about menopause symptoms, because we've got an ageing workforce, and women, it's really shocking. I can't remember the statistic, but it's shocking how many women leave the workforce because of menopause.
Yeah.
It is a really scary stat, and that should not be the case. It's really quite tragic, and we need to sort of help them be seen. So tools like this sound really handy for helping to do that piece as well. Hopefully helping the individuals, but just showing employers this is real.
Yeah. Next week we're doing a webinar, not to plug our webinars, but we're basically the goal of the webinar is to embarrass me. So we're going to have our clinical lead, Dr. Nicola Tick is her name, and I'm going to ask her questions about women's health issues related to musculoskeletal pain, because that's our world.
She should ask you the questions.
So this is the idea.
This is the point.
I'm going to show my stupidity through the questions that I ask, and some of them will be things that I have learned in the last 6 months, and I'll be honest and say I actually know the answer to this, but I didn't 6 months ago, and she's going to talk about it. And some of them I still don't know, haven't spent 2 years, and not to get into a world of justifying myself here, but I have to be upfront about I don't have the lived experience. So, and I do have 20 employees now, so I do have a duty of care to half of my workforce have these issues that I don't have. And specifically to musculoskeletal pain is what we're experts in. Obviously, there's a whole other wider array of gender-specific healthcare. But as someone who's worked in musculoskeletal health for 17 years now, it is embarrassing that I don't know about these issues that affect half the population. So if
go
anyone wants
easy
to
on
come and watch
yourself.
me with a red face, that's our plan next.
I'm definitely going to tune in, but go easy on yourself. Sounds like you do have a lot of knowledge about a lot of other things, so we'll let you off on that one. I'll say that on behalf of the female the females in the room. Just tell me a couple more things before we wrap up. So you mentioned before some of the people that you work with, some of the organisations. Some of those, are they healthcare providers? So do you kind of have a product within their suite of offerings?
Good question, actually, but no. So basically, our goal at the start was, how do we prove whether this works or not? And one of the theories was, when someone gets pain now, what's the traditional approach? And let's say they go to Bupa and they get escalated to Bupa and have physio, and Bupa's an amazing company. So we had this theory of, if we can sell to Bupa, we know it works, because they know what they're talking about. They're the ones who are making the money of it being escalated. So we started talking to them early on as in, like, this is a real test. And then we went to Simply Health and did the same thing, and then we went to AXA and did the same thing. And the argument is then, that's some evidence for us of those are the people, not that who know what they're talking about, because of course they do, and lots of people know what they're talking about, but if we can prove it in that sphere, then there's a real strong argument for it.
I get you. Sounds like a good strategic move. And so you're directly B2C, B2B, sorry, and you are here at the Health and Wellbeing at Work conference.
We are.
Meeting lots of people, connecting with lots of people. Yeah, has it been fruitful?
It's brilliant, Jan, and I should know our name, stand. It's 150B or so. We're somewhere. It is. It's brilliant, and it's lovely to see. For this event, you get to talk to people who are in the corporates, so people who have responsibility for a lot of employees. We also get to talk to quite a lot of healthcare professionals, and I think those are really valuable conversations, because they'll ask the difficult questions. Like, they'll ask, well, how are you going to catch these people, and should this person be escalated, and how do you work with that? And it's a great place for us to basically sense check that we are thinking about all the boxes, because clinicians will be the first people to tell you you're not when you're not. So it's this particular event is a nice kind of amalgamation or merging of those two different groups.
Yeah. This is my first time here, but does feel like there is a strong kind of clinical occupational health presence here, and that does feel reassuring. I think there's lots of really great MSK education and support, as I said, yoga teacher here, all for all of that content that's being created and all of those services. But really great to hear of something really solid and science academic backed as a tool that's out in the market. So look forward to your webinar.
We also do other webinars where the goal isn't to embarrass me. I should also plug there's a musculoskeletal stage at this event, which is not often the case, and genuinely every talk is brilliant. They've got all these just fantastic clinicians giving talks, and evidence-based is like the word of the day. Like everybody is backing up what they're saying with the evidence behind it. Which is just brilliant.
Yeah, really needed. And it's there. There's it in droves, as you have created, I'm sure, and done in your academic work. There's just tons of it out there. So it's really great to finally, I guess, see some products, and exciting products too, like AI, machine learning based products. So amazing. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. Cheers.